So we're having it says it's, it looks like we're having a little trouble with Facebook going live. You are live on YouTube. Let me try to get you going again on Facebook. All right, Dr. Burris, Dr. Kim, you are live on YouTube, and I will work behind the scenes to get
Okay.
us live on Facebook.
Awesome.
Very cool. Well, welcome everyone.
I'm Dr. Burris,
I'm Dr. Michael Kim.
and we're here in the Coachella Valley with Coachella Valley Direct Primary Care.
And this is our show where we do the numbers in the valley. We talk about COVID in general. A lot of it is applicable to many places, but we really do narrow it down to our little community. And, we have lots of ebbs and flows. And this week is the tennis tournament coming in.
Yeah, BNP Paribas Open Invitational.
I don't know.
Something. And so, this is sort of another march towards normalcy, if you will, in that some of our events, our big events, are returning to the area. So that's, like good and scary, and so, but necessary. Today is October 4th, yes, and it's 2021. And today I thought, we're going to talk a little bit about the numbers first, and then we're going to talk a little bit about grief today. And I thought I would just sort of talk about why I chose this topic while we're sort of working out some of our technical issues. And the reason I chose it is partially because I've recognized that both ourselves and a lot of the people around us are exhibiting signs that they're dealing with grief. And there are so many things that can cause grief. The obvious is the loss of a loved one. And there are so many families. There's over 1 million families who are grieving the loss of someone with COVID. But there's also a lot of other losses that occurred, non-COVID related deaths, as well as things that aren't necessarily a death, but are still significant losses. And what are some things that you've seen people have to struggle with losing over this past year or two?
Well, there's a lot of things, there's, you name it, it's been lost. I don't think there's an area that hasn't been touched, from jobs to life to possessions to homes to businesses to,
well, and I
activities.
the loss of normalcy is a big one. Just feeling, almost like disconnected from what you thought was your routines,
Right.
Disconnected from your support systems, your regular stress relieving activities. And then if you're a parent, looking at what your children have lost as far as 2 to 3 years of normal school time. So all of this adds up. So we're going to talk about that today.
Well, why don't you jump into the numbers,
Okay.
And then we'll get into the other stuff.
All right. So we'll start here with our daily epidemiology for Riverside County. And this report is from last Friday. And what you start to see in the numbers, if you follow them every day, like some of us geeky people do, is that the beginning of the week, the numbers are lower, and towards the end of the week, the numbers look higher. And really what's happening is what we're seeing is an average of the cases that are being reported out that week. Over the weekend, fewer tests are performed, and so on Monday, fewer tests are reported out. And yet, towards the end of the week, you get some catch-up. So this is a Friday number, so the numbers of new cases are 663, which is on the higher range of what we saw in the last week. as well as we're starting to see some of those deaths being reported out that we know have happened. This is the week that we passed the 5,000 death milestone for the county. I think it's maybe appropriate to remark on that. And we've had around 1,000 deaths in the Coachella Valley, and that's really a lot. And so I think it's a good time to sort of, notice that. If we go down to the bottom of this slide, what we'll see is that we are continuing to have a nice sort of slow decrease in our positivity rates. We're down now closer to 6. But again, these numbers are not super low yet. We're heading in the right direction, but there's a reason why we still have some mitigation factors being applied. Things like masking indoors, vaccine requirements. It's because there's still a lot of COVID out there. We've just gotten used to COVID being astronomically high, that it feels like a 6% positivity rate is pretty good. But remember, before Delta hit, we were down at around, less than 2% positivity rate. So once we get back to that point, we'll probably be more at a background level of transmission rather than where we are now, which is still widespread transmission, moderately widespread. So next slide is looking at the Coachella Valley's weekly numbers. And again, these numbers lag a bit. They're only being reported out every week. But again, they're showing that we're still moving in the right direction, that we're following Riverside County and actually doing a slightly bit better than the rest of Riverside County, which I think probably reflects the fact that our vaccination rates here in the Valley are quite high. And so we've had other parts of Riverside County that haven't done as well at their vaccination, and they're sort of still experiencing higher levels of transmission. If you go down a bit, we'll look at our ICU and hospitalization numbers. They're stable. I wouldn't really call these markedly improved or worsened. Our ICU numbers went up a little. Our hospital numbers went down a little. So we're getting there, but we're not out of the woods yet. Basically, it's like we're on the downslope of the curve, but the curve's not going straight down. It's kind of going down on a real gentle slope.
Right. And then I would surmise, unfortunately, probably 50% of those ICU COVID cases won't survive.
Yeah. So we're looking at quite a few more deaths.
Yeah.
Let's go all the way down, because I do like that they've put our vaccination rates here, and we can see that the Valley is doing great. We're not, great, but we're not bad. So we've got 64% fully vaccinated and almost 76% partially vaccinated. So that's reflecting our slightly better than the rest of Riverside County numbers. So well done us. All right. So now I want to go to the next slide and, talk about grief a little bit. We had talked earlier that grief was something that was affecting a lot of us. It was affecting us. It's affecting people we know. It's affecting our children. And one of the things that I think can be difficult for people is if they don't experience the actual loss, like somebody close to them died, they can be surprised that they're actually grieving because it's not a typical cause of grief. Like, for instance, the loss of your usual holiday activities, or the loss of a relationship that used to be something that you enjoyed and now it's strained because of some of the pressures and stresses around this past year or two. And it can show up in different ways. Like, it's not just being sad. So I thought we could go over some of these physical signs of grieving, and people can see if, hey, maybe some of the things I've been experiencing are actually a sign that I'm going through this process.
Well, I think grief is one of those things that we as a society, in general, don't do well because it's a difficult subject. And most people, like you said, think of it only in terms of extremes, right? I lost my dad 3 years ago. I got fired today out of the job out of the blue. My girlfriend dumped me, or, I failed an important test. But in day-to-day life, there are little mini griefs. And for children, their grief is not like ours, but, the things that they can grieve can be experienced and come out in symptoms the same way that we would for major things. So I think this is a good topic, and it can touch a lot of different things. And I think it's important to know that grief has both cognitive, meaning, things that you think about. It can be expressed in symptoms like physical manifestation of things. And then that leads to your emotional kind of where you are. So
some of the things I'd like to put out there is, we'll start with the cognitive. And, there are a lot of people who are surprised or frustrated with themselves, or even maybe even concerned that they may be experiencing early dementia or something, because they're having difficulty in the cognitive realm. So being able to think clearly, feeling numb, memory problems, attention span problems. Like, I had some family losses some years ago, and since then I haven't been able to actually sit down and read like a book for fun. I can read other things, I can read articles, I can read job related things, I can read news, but I can't sit down and read a book for fun. I just don't have the attention span for that. And it's interesting, that distractibility, and that carries over to some other things that have been sort of like a domino effect, like um, having problems with motivation. This is more into the emotional side. Um, Feeling like there's no point, being scared, having anxiety. These are all features of grief. Even things like a panic attack, irritability.
all right, but now you're moving in other areas. So we moved in.
I've moved into emotional.
Okay, all right.
Yes. Okay.
So I do want to say though, for me, there's two types of cognitive. Cognitive in the sense, like you said, it has to do with your brain higher functioning, right? So concentration, distractibility, but also cognitive to me is your thoughts. So you can have a lot of different thoughts based on the different areas, whether it's, emotional, spiritual, or cognitive itself. So, I just wanted to say those are the two distinctions that, there are grief thoughts people go through, not
Right.
just cognitive, what happens to your brain.
Right. Just not your brain's function, but actually the thoughts that you're having.
Right.
And some of those thoughts are going to tie into the emotions.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to hit anger for a little bit, because I feel like as a culture, we kind of got stuck in angry. And I know I've really been dealing with that too. And recognizing that that's actually a function somewhat of some grief. And being able to recognize that helps you kind of manage it or understand it, or even understand it in others. So when you see someone getting angry and you're like, hey, wait, they're angry at me, but I didn't really do this thing. They're just angry about something, but they seem to be taking it out on me. Not saying I just stand there and take abuse, but also recognizing that some of that anger that's being directed my way is okay for me to just kind of let it go, because it's not really about me. That's sometimes it's difficult to do, but also recognizing that some of the anger that I've got isn't really necessarily fairly applied on this other person. And this is probably most obviously seen in our family life, where we're all in close, proximity, and you can see your teenager just blow up at you for no particular reason. And you're like, hey, I don't deserve that. It's true, you don't. But recognizing that some of this is them experiencing emotions they don't understand and they don't handle, and that's the same for adults.
Right.
We're all sort of handling emotions that we don't fully understand right now, and it's good to recognize that.
Right. Anger is we could spend a whole hour on it. It's each one of these has their own thoughts, their own feelings, and then their own behaviors, both how you experience it and how other people might experience your anger. And so it's important that you recognize all three of those, because then you won't know what you're feeling.
Right. Let's go back up and hit the physical side of things.
Yeah, because I think this is really an important one.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're stressed, or your neck is hurting, you have headaches, you're just, all these things can come from, and various things. Grief is one of those things. But
and then the place where I see a lot of times people don't understand that their grief is a part of their physical symptom. I think we all understand things like, I was all tense and I got a headache. That's an easier connection
or
to
crying,
make.
right?
Right. But things like I'm feeling extremely exhausted, or I feel nauseated and I can't eat, or I have stomach aches, or I'm having chest pain or shortness of breath. Also feeling tightness in the chest. That's a very common symptom. I've even seen people have rashes. If you have a chronic illness, it will often flare when you're under stress like this from an emotional issue. So having a different illness that gets worse, very common. And I try to help people understand that it's not, if something has an emotional component, it doesn't mean it's in their head and it's not real. You have a real physical symptom, but in order to treat it, we have to treat both what's going on in the physical as well as what's going on in the mental and emotional and spiritual components of a person's health.
Right.
Because I can treat stress-induced insomnia with sleeping pill and put someone to sleep, but until we also address the driver of that stress, that problem will still continue to pop up.
Right. I like to tell people kind of emotional things like grief, anxiety, depression, whether they're short-lived or actually part of a chronic disease. I like to liken it with my examples. I like examples. It's like a dial for an input to a microphone. Kind of when you're at your normal operating capacity, that level of input you can modulate. But when you're grief or anxiety or whatever, that input level goes to 10. So any little change is felt so dramatically. You're like, this didn't used to bother me and now it does. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And it's because you're probably either grieving or anxious. Something is going on that has amplified your ability to regulate things that are coming into your life.
I think about it as having a margin on the side of your paper. If you've got these nice cushy margins, if you go over a little bit on a line, it doesn't matter. But if you've got zero margin on your paper and you go over a little bit, you're now off the paper and you're writing on the table. So I feel like for many of us, the chronic stress of everything that's been going on has completely erased all of our margins.
Right.
So we're at the edges right now.
Right. So we're at 20 minutes. So.
Oh yeah. So we should probably cut this short. I do feel like this is a topic that we can come back and explore more, because we have a lot more we can talk about, including the stages of grief, where that concept, that structural concept came from, and whether it's really a useful concept, and how we can sort of understand our grief. And also then, of course, beyond that, how do we address grief in our own lives and in the people around us to help support us?
Sure. So I think we'll put a pin in that. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah.
Taking a higher level approach right now, kind of rounding it off. We've talked about grief because whether you've lost a loved one or not, you have lost something. All of us have lost something for this pandemic, and we did it on purpose.
Some of it we did on purpose, and some of it happened to us. Yeah.
Because of what we've done, and some of it happened, maybe we didn't do anything about it. But recognizing that grief can be a normal and it should be a healthy process. But if it also extends too long, then it runs into something that maybe you should definitely see a professional for. But we will come back to the stages
Topic,
of grief and the topic next time. But overall, the numbers are looking well. The Delta numbers are going down. I do think we're going to see a little bump everywhere, because as it goes down and we decrease our mitigating effects of what we've done for COVID, like you said, it's still at 6%. So, we're going to see little bumps during holidays. I would imagine our valley is going to see a little bump, because this tennis tournament is not a small tournament. It is a big thing. I know people who fly in from across the country just to watch this thing. So
yeah,
we have a lot of in and out of our population. So, but we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. So.
Well, I do feel like this season is, we're seeing more people return, so we're having more people come back. Thankfully, a lot of the big events are coming back as well.
Yeah.
And so that's good for the economy. It'll be good for just our small businesses. And so this winter is looking positive.
Right. So keep doing what you're doing, and we'll get through this. We've always said that this is not a forever thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we will see you next week, and we'll talk about the numbers and grief. Thanks, everybody. Oh, stay tuned for our next show, too, if you can.